Well, hello and hello to all of you. Happy Thursday to you, wherever you are joining us from. Well, unfortunately, the market decided to not have a great day today. Once again, as you knew, today we were expecting unemployment numbers, and unfortunately, we did once again have a 2.4 million unemployed Americans filed last week, adding to that. So we're now at 38.6 million of us are unemployed. So certainly a lot of people still suffering, and that was reflected in the market. Today, the Dow closed down 101 points, and the NASDAQ closed down 90 points. So we will see how tomorrow goes, but certainly we are looking for some guidance. We're hoping our politicians can come together and show us more signs of relief, so more aid, and really give us more direction on how we're going to make ends meet. For the average American, they're looking and hoping for more stimulus here. And Facebook also announced today that they expect about half of their employees going forward to be able to continue to work from home. So we'll see, and we'll follow more stories like that. But today, I'm very excited to introduce you to someone I've been looking forward to meeting for quite some time. She's someone that I've had the honor of following on Twitter. She is definitely a dynamo woman leader. In fact, she's someone I look up to, and I think many of you do as well. And if you don't, I imagine after this interview, you'll have someone else that you'll want to send that holiday greeting card to. I am so excited and proud to introduce you to the one and only Perez. She is Senior Vice President, Chief Communications and Public Affairs Expert, Sustainability and Marketing Assets Officer at the one and only Coca-Cola. B, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Great, Winnie. Thank you for having me. And I'm as much of a fan of yours. I follow you on Twitter. I read all your stories. And thank you always for giving us a good perspective on what's happening. And so thank you for having me.
You are so kind. You are really too kind. It's an honor. I actually selfishly wish that we were still in New York City filming and you were in studio, but I know, this is certainly a very big change for you. I can only imagine, typically, like you would probably be in a different city right now, right? On a plane, going somewhere. How has this been a change for you?
Well, it's interesting. On one hand, it's great that I have some extra time, that I'm not in a car commuting or in an airplane. But on the other hand, I get a little sad because I love to see all the work, and I'm sure you're reading about some of the work we're doing in the community. And I want to be there. I want to be there to see the doctors' faces or the nurses when we give the medical shields, or when we're donating the product supply, or when we're doing the donation work with the Red Cross. So I kind of miss being out there with the community, but I will say that we have a lot of people who are out there on the ground, who live and work in these areas already, who are there representing the company. And the volunteers have just been amazing. So I am sad to not be there with them. I do miss that part of it. But I also love just seeing the stories and the photos that they send me. And they send me a lot of the photos.
They do. And I see you share a lot of this on your Twitter stream. And one story that really caught my eye, and I thought it was so cool. And I think I'm going to go tell my kids, they're going to think it's so cool. But, Coca-Cola created so many face shields for our medical professionals, right? And it makes sense because you're able to source plastic goods like this probably better than most companies can. And I'm sure, I'm just wondering, do the face shields have a Coca-Cola logo?
No, they don't. And so actually one fun story is this really started with Georgia Tech and Coca-Cola. Engineering students across the street from our headquarters had an idea, and we said, well, let's donate the supply and let's see how we can get this partnership going. And it was great. We donated the supply. It was the students' ingenuity and their innovations that actually worked hard to build the actual face shields. That was the first one we did. And when it was donated to the various hospitals and locations for the medical workers here in Atlanta, it was amazing. And so we started to share that around the United States and around the world, and it quickly spread like wildfire. And people said, we want to do this now that we know it can be done. But I have to give a lot of credit to the students and their ideas around innovation, and the fact that our company said, okay, let's partner with them. Let's help them out. So it was really fun to see that just the university right across the street from our headquarters is where the partnership started.
That's beautiful. And that gives us a lot of hope, right? It is that sort of that next generation that we have found that, especially with Generation Z, they're really hands-on. They really want to help. And I'm sure this is a rewarding experience for them to partner with Coca-Cola and vice versa. So that's wonderful. That actually makes it even better of a story, especially since it was happening just in your neighborhood. It's like literally your neighbors stepped in and together you did something that you could do. And on that, I mean, I'm excited to see leadership like yourself. You know, we talk about that, especially in financial news, sort of that void, if you will, of the female voice in a lot of major corporations. But I think that's sort of changing, and we're seeing more leaders like yourself. And so I'd love to, if you don't mind, kind of pivot to that direction. I'd like to talk about women leadership, and especially during this time of COVID. What have you been seeing? What's your perspective? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because what women typically have been coached to change is actually what makes the leadership trait so strong, especially in a time like now. I'm sure, if you've had mentors before, they might have said to you, you need to get right to business when you get on your meetings, or you need to, not be as nice sometimes. You have to really be more business minded and focused. Well, the reality is all of these wonderful traits where all the studies from McKinsey Research Catalyst says women tend to over-index, or feminine leadership styles over-index in terms of empathy and also caring, and also at the same time managing the balance with the work. And so it's not trading off one for the other. It's actually integrating in empathy and caring into work to drive performance and greater performance. And what I see is that right now, especially in this time around the world, we need to have diversity at the table, and that includes women's perspective and a gender balanced way to make decisions. Right now, we know, and it's interesting, I was just reading some research earlier. There was a study done, I think, in 2018 by McKinsey, and it said that companies who have gender balance in leadership are more likely to perform 21% higher than other companies who don't. Well, imagine the decisions that are required in today's environment and all of the people who have had the world changed right underneath them. There are some people who are working. There's, as you know, 70% of the workers on the front lines happen to be women. So some people are still at work. And then there's some people who are used to going into an office who are now at home. And what's happened is the school life, if they're a parent, has come into their home, or maybe they don't have a big setup that they have technology to make it easy. And all of a sudden, there's all this complexity. Mm-hmm. And if you're a woman, you also know some of the data around women tend to have the higher burden of the unpaid work. It's the doing the laundry, the doing the dishes. And so now maybe they're homeschooling, now maybe they're taking care. But the reality is that with the right support and the right balance at home, these women are needed at the table to make decisions because of what's happening. And the decisions will be better if you're pushing and driving diverse thinking and more inclusive thinking. And then one thing I like to recognize is that, empathy is required. I think when people get on video calls and they start having conversations with colleagues, the first question really should be, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? How can I help you? I mean, business is going to always be business. Work will get done. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we put people at the center of those decisions and that we understand where people are coming from and what are their unique situations. So I think right now, more than ever before, women are positioned to lead. I do appreciate the fact that we've been on what I call this 100-year journey. I think this was supposed to be the year of celebrating women in leadership. And if you also look at what's happening in some of the critical decisions being made today by heads of states that happen to be women, if you look at, Norway, if you look at Germany, if you look at New Zealand, the women who are running these countries made decisions fast. They used empathy, people first. They were highly decisive, and they put certain parameters in place that are driving stronger outcomes for their nations. So imagine if we had more diverse thinking at the table, more women leaders who are, rising into these critical areas of decision making. Right now, we need it. We absolutely need these different perspectives, and we need the empathy and we need the caring.
I love that you say this. This is so powerful and so true. I mean, I think many of you who are watching would agree. I mean, as women, we're juggling not only home, we're juggling work as well. And I know a lot of husbands and men are there as well, but I completely agree with you. This is such a true fact that if you want a voice, if you want that other perspective, you have to have the person at the table, right? Different backgrounds, different styles. When we were just having a conversation earlier, before we got on live here, of like that our husbands are so different too, right? I mean, your husband is juggling as much, if not more, right? But nonetheless, he is just as important, but so are you. And I think if it's that important in the household, as my husband, who is now juggling our three children during distance learning, would agree that we're all important. And I love that you bring up that fact about empathy. I do think that, I think we can't argue the fact that women are men and men are different. And we not only run our households differently, but we also are different in the workplace. And that perspective and that different style, right? Some women are just as empathetic as women, but it's still nice to have different perspective, and it can only make us stronger. And you share that great study from McKinsey that showed that this is not just the right decision. This is the profitable decision, right?
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
It is. And I love talking about my husband. I feel like I have someone at home who's very enlightened, but he also works hard. And it's interesting. And so we were just sharing that he works at the CDC. So his hours are longer, they're stretched out. There is not a lot of flexibility in what he has to do. And we need him to be there and to be productive and to work. At the same time, he recognizes that now that I'm working from home, I can't take on every single responsibility. So how do you share that burden of that home life? And we have two children as well. We have one of those seniors who, doesn't have a graduation ceremony, doesn't have a prom, and is going up and down. I hate to tell you, he's accepted to go to your competition over there, your alma mater competition. He's going to be a Trojan. So I'm sorry, Winnie, because I know there's that rivalry. So you might see us on the West Coast if he gets to move in. But, it's interesting. We also have a daughter who's 15. And my husband paused last week when we saw these laundry baskets just piling up. And he offered to do the laundry. And I felt guilty at that point, because we want men to do that. We want the men to take their fair share. At the same time, I had that moment of, oh my goodness, he's like out there trying to save lives at the CDC. And okay, I'll do the laundry. But you know what? He actually did it. And it was interesting because I was watching our kids watch him. And I think that role modeling is really important. And as we have this next generation coming, we talked a little bit about that from the Georgia Tech example. This next generation needs to see that it is possible, that people will take the fair share of their home and work life and contribute. And at the same time, that we need to be inclusive and we need to be respectful of each other and make sure we're checking in. And so I feel fortunate too that at Coca-Cola, we have a strong platform around women's leadership, but we also drive the actions and live it. So, we have 42% of our board of directors are women. We have 5 female directors. Our lead director is Mel Agmesino, female, phenomenal leader. We have over 33% of our senior leadership are women. We have our president of our Mexico business unit, Gala Molinas, female. Lana, who is running our Central Eastern European business. Darlene running Canada. All the presidents of the business, as well as our head of technical, Nancy Kwan. She's the reason why we're still operating and doing well and able to drive this business and business growth, because she's managing the entire supply chain. It's one of the smartest people I know. She happens to be a female driving some significant work in our business and critical decisions. We have Lisa Chang, who's the head of our people function. Jennifer Mann, who's the president of our global ventures business, who launched our new Costa stores all over and has had to make decisions on the fly in terms of, okay, we have to move from in coffee shops to drive-throughs. How do we make sure we keep our people safe? Mm-hmm. And, at the same time, over 48% of our global workforce are women. So I'm proud to see that while we talk about it externally and we have external programs around women's economic empowerment, we've had a series of senior leaders in the company who've always believed that women are important. And one little fun fact, I always love to look at history. If you go back to our archives, Coca-Cola was the first public corporation to have a woman on its corporate board of directors. This was in 1934.
Good for Coca-Cola.
For Coca-Cola. So Letty Pate Whitehead Evans, Robert Woodruff was our chairman and CEO at the time, and he wanted a woman's perspective on the board to understand, how do we think about women who are purchasing our products and bringing them into the homes, and how to think about driving the business. Nowhere in any of the minutes of these board meetings that I've looked at in our archives said they wanted a woman to fill a slot. It was all about the business decision and what she would be able to contribute. By the way, most people don't know that also, if you really look into her background, she also was the head of one of our bottling operations. She had an operational background. That's in the 1930s.
That's
I mean, it's incredible. And so I feel fortunate to be in a company where that's been part of the DNA and we truly drive those beliefs into actions. I think that it's something that everywhere around the world we can truly benefit, because we do need to make sure that we have that fairness and that gender balance.
Well, being, Coca-Cola obviously is a global brand, and you have a daughter. So I'm curious to see how your perspective of sort of the next generation, right? When you're seeing our younger generation now, what do our future women leaders look like? What are things that we can do to help foster and support them to get to that next stage? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, well, one thing I know is that we're in good hands with these future generations. And it's because if you look at what they're doing around the world, these young women are driving change. So I'm very proud of my daughter. She always pushes me to be better. She asks questions. She reads. She follows me on Twitter. She follows you on Twitter, Winnie. So don't be surprised if she sends you a question. But if then I look at people in her generation, and it's the Gretas of the world, the Greta Thunberg, who drove change in terms of climate. She said enough is enough. And what she did is she was a student who went out, positioned it with her government and got the world's imagination and attention to drive fundamental change in this space. She had the heads of states and the world CEOs listening to her. She had the world coming out to make sure that people were supporting how we drive societal change. That's one of the young leaders of the future. I truly believe that our world is in very good hands. When you look at how change is being driven and the activism that they're creating to drive true change for the world. And if you look at it, it's a lot of young women. It's a lot of young women who are looking at role models like you, Winnie, and saying, I can do it. I can actually talk about the finances of a business now. I'm not expected to just go into the softer side where maybe women have over-indexed in terms of careers, but I can do anything. I can be the CEO. I can be a head of state when they look at the prime ministers who are women. And so there's a lot of hope, a lot of power in that. And I think that these future young women of the world are going to really hold us all accountable for the decisions we make in our generations. And they're going to push us to be uncomfortable. They're going to challenge the status quo. And they're going to come with solutions in mind. The one thing that I also see very differently about the young generation of women that I'm fortunate enough to get to talk to is that they have a lot of ideas. They have a lot of innovations, and they bring those forward. So that gives me a lot of hope for this next generation, and where you and I, at some point when we're retiring and doing whatever we do, although I get the sense that you're not going to ever truly retire and probably
I think hanging out, be somewhere together, near a beach, and then try to put your business bench. I don't know. It'll be fun.
Exactly. But I have a lot of confidence and faith that these future leaders are the people who are just starting to emerge now, and they're not waiting to be an adult to make these decisions. They're driving it right now, and they're saying, okay, I might be 16, I might be 15, I might be whatever age, but I'm going to now go out and have my voice be heard. And I think that is truly different. I mean, it took 100 years for women to really start to move into these positions, and significant progress has been made. And I just think back to, I guess it was Beijing's women's conference, the conference on women, almost 25 years ago now, where they equated human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights. And equality really was driven through one of those catalytic moments, and it has continued since. And so I think that these young generations are going to drive change. And I also think it's going to be young men. We need society to work together. Women alone aren't going to drive the change. It's going to be men and women together, boys and girls, who say, you know what, I want people to be successful. My son, who's 18 now, he asked me a question maybe about a year ago, and he said, Mom, he said, why is it that there aren't more women CEOs? What's happened? Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I said, well, why are you asking that question? I'm curious why you're asking. And he said, well, I don't see why women can't be CEOs, but I hear and I read all these things. And so it was interesting because we had a good conversation back then about how women's rights were really just evolving over time and opportunities for women. And also sometimes some of the self-tape that women have had in our own heads, because maybe we've been told for so long, you can't. But until we started to see others who could or who did, and the women who came before us to remove the barriers for our generation, we didn't know it was possible till we saw that happen. And it was really interesting to hear my son talk about that. And I thought, you know what, it's also going to be the boys and the men who work with women together to actually drive the change.
Well, let's talk about we talk about a lot of positive. I'm excited to see our next generation sort of rise and really have more of a voice and continue to build on the momentum that I think we've had along the last few years for sure. But talk about some of the challenge or perils, you will, of female leaders, during this pandemic, and how can we offset that challenge? Because obviously, just like yourself, I have children at home, and I think you translate that to so many Americans right now that are going through, the concerns of choosing between health and continue to make a living and bring in income and everything else that they have to sort of juggle. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we know there's a lot of research that's been done in this space around women's voices maybe sometimes not being listened to. So we might speak, but sometimes people aren't on the other side receiving, or that sort of old notion of when we were in a conference room and a woman said something, an idea came up, maybe it was discounted, a guy would say the same thing 10 minutes later and people would listen. And so what I actually think is there's a couple things that I see going on, and some of this are personal perspectives. One is I actually think that we're going to have to, as women, almost rethink all of that advice we got for our careers to drive these advancements, because a lot of us were told, get some FaceTime with your boss, make sure you swing by, be active and participate and network in person, go on the golf course if you have to. And a lot of those rules don't apply right now. You're on video monitors. And so it's going to be different. And those are for us, the women who are lucky to actually work from home on a video monitor. You still have a lot of other women who are not that lucky, who are on the front lines and who are exhausted. They're working extra shifts. They're coming home. They're still trying to manage their kids. Maybe they don't have childcare. Maybe they're single moms raising their kids. And so there's a lot of different situations. I think we're going to have to rethink what success looks like and how we manage our own success and actually take control. So I'll just give an example on my world. I found I was on a video call the other day. I happened to be the only female on the video call. I was listening and listening and listening. I was not an expert on this topic, and I almost didn't say anything. I almost fell into that old mindset of, well, I'm not the expert. I'll just let them talk, and then maybe I'll send a note later. And I realized I had to force myself to actually speak up, even though I wasn't 100% sure if I was, contributing as best as I could. But I had to get out of that fear factor. So it's the reset. It's reminding yourself, speak up. That video actually requires you to speak up more, because you can go through an entire video call where people don't see all the small squares on the box. They're not even sure you're there, and you can almost disappear or fade out. Or if you're someone who isn't lucky enough to be at home on a video call, but you're working somewhere on a shift all day long and you have to come home, actually starting to say, no, I can't, my house is going to be a mess this week. I'm not going to pick up the laundry. And if I'm lucky enough to have, a helping hand at home, then my spouse or partner, I need you to do that for me. Or to tell the kids, I told my kids last week, I love my kids. I think they're fantastic. But last week I said, I can't cook every single night. You guys are going to have to cook. So now you guys take a night. And I told them they can make whatever they want. But I think redefining success, redefining how we take care of ourselves, taking really, that stock of what do we need? And also starting to change some of the rules of how we used to maybe think career success was driven, because you're not going to have the FaceTime today. You're not going to be in the office walking down the hall sharing your ideas. So how do you get other people to listen that you might not always have access to? Or if you end up taking a new role during this time, imagine people who are accepting new jobs at new companies. How do you build the network of those relationships and that drive sort of those cultural, areas where that you need to actually onboard someone in a different way, or you need to help them differently. And as that individual, it might be a little bit scarier because the rules don't apply anymore to what you used to know or what people told you.
So this is so fascinating. And those of you who are watching, I know you're loving this conversation as much as I am, because someone at B's level even still continues to feel that insecurity being the only female in that group of men on that conference call. Like, we all still feel this way and still having a challenge of also, taking care of ourselves at home. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we've done that at home as well. I mean, you can cook, you can do laundry, you can help out, but also having that voice and being very, very proactive. I think, I think that's something I've seen you share recently, more so on Twitter. And I've been thinking about this a lot, of sort of being very proactive on what you want, communicating your value, but again, sort of retraining ourselves, because it's really easy to forget how far we've come, right? And to revert back to those feelings of, once again, being like, should I say something? Should I not say something? In fact, B, you're going to love this. Yesterday night, my husband was watching this Zoom call, and I jumped in. I was like, oh, are you in a meeting? He's like, no. I'm watching the school district's call of what it's going to look like come fall, right? For our kids. And you're going to love this. It was two women leaders, two members of the school district and one council member. And it was two women and a man, and they were talking about, the sort of what it was going to look like, what our kids are going to experience when they get back to school, and sort of what normalcy looked like. And after that, we all watched it together, and the kids too. And after that, I said, I feel really good. I feel like this is going to be okay. He's like, I know, I love it, because I felt like they were listening, they were empathetic, and most importantly, that they weren't political. Like, the whole agenda was just to the betterment of parents and children. Like, how can we make their situation better? How can we be kind and thoughtful to each individual child's needs, and realize that there's mental health concerns as well as physical concerns and health concerns. And I was like, B would love this, because this is sort of exactly what you're talking about. We need more of this, right? We need more of listening and caring. And one of the leaders, she just kept saying over and over, give us your ideas. We want to hear from you. We don't know how we're going to deal with high school graduation this year. How can we get 600 parents to stay in their cars with their students, right? Not to mention grandparents. And how can we keep everyone safe? But if you have an idea, we want to hear from you. And I thought to myself, this is exactly what leadership looks like. It looks like asking those questions and inviting better opinions, because it could just be a parent or a grandparent or even a student who comes up with that aha moment of, that's how we can pull off graduation, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And also reminding ourselves to help each other. When you're on one of these calls, and if you see someone struggling, or if you see someone not paying attention, interject and say, hey, what do you think Jennifer might have a point of view here, or Nancy, or whoever, and remind people that they're there and help each other and support each other. This is definitely the time where we all have to rally and share each other's good ideas, and make sure that women are noticed, and that the women's skills that we bring to the table, like the empathy, the caring, the true listening of, those two individuals running that school district. I'm sure they're worried. They don't know. It's a very ambiguous world. It's very difficult to think about a school environment with 6 feet distance in between you, and really worrying that a student might get sick and what happens. And so that's a scary time for them. But the fact that they're actually listening, engaging, holding those calls, genuinely wanting that feedback, I think it's going to be important for other women in this society, or even for people like your husband, to chime in and help support them. Because we all know that, unfortunately, no one is perfect. There will be mistakes made during this time, and criticism will come. So how do we support each other, knowing that the good intent was there, and that really we all have to work together, especially in this time of need? This is the time to help one another.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I can't emphasize enough. Absolutely what B said. This is the time to help one another. And I can't thank you enough for your time, B. This has been an incredible conversation. To be honest with you, I could talk to you for hours and learn from you. And so I think many of us feel that way. B, how can we continue to follow your journey, the things that you're working on, and what's the best way to stay in touch?
Oh, thank you, Winnie, for asking. So feel free to please follow me on Twitter. So it's at BPerezB, and that's BEA Perez. Oh, you just put it up, so people can follow it there. And at the same time, feel free to DM me. I do respond. I read my own tweets, and I'm also on LinkedIn. So same, you can follow me on LinkedIn and you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram was I remade it public. My daughter made me realize that I had it private because I was posting more family photos. And so she helped me actually reset it. So my Instagram is now public again. But please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to communicate in any way. And Winnie, thank you for reaching out to me. It is a pleasure. I could talk to you for hours, and whatever I can do to support you and help you during this time as well, please let me know, and please for anyone else to reach out as well.
Absolutely. And the same goes for us here. Any ways that we can support you and all your efforts with your family and Coca-Cola, and how fortunate they are to have a leader like you is quite so inspiring. So thank you for your time. I know you've got another meeting to go to, and we appreciate also those of you who've tuned in and watched us live. We appreciate you so much. And with that, we will see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much, Bea, for your time.
Thank you, Winnie. Take care.